Live. Okay, welcome to Senate Institutions. It's February 4th, 2025. We have one item on our agenda, which will be the Department of Corrections. But before we get there, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Wendy Harrison, Senator from Windham, Chair of this committee.
Senator Russ Engel, Essex.
Senator Joe Major, Windsor.
Senator Rob Plunkett, Pennington District.
Senator Sam Bose, Orleans District.
Terrific. Thank you, everybody. And as folks know, this committee is working with corrections now in a more active way, not just dealing with the buildings, but also dealing with the operations. And we have with us today Nicholas Demmel, the commissioner, and he is going to speak to us about the staffing challenges that the system is experiencing and how you're addressing it. So take the chair, please. Thank you.
You still have that old chair.
I know.
It's got a nice thick pad.
Yeah.
You got that
What
going.
happened to our wooden one? We had a wooden chair there before.
I don't know, we've had that all year. And
Yeah,
people
but before we
some
had
people
it.
want another chair and we have one on order.
It gives them a break in the throw, you know.
It's a bit audacious to come into a Senate committee and ask for a different chair.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this is institution.
Yes.
We know how to fund it.
Yeah, you don't have the best chair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you for being here. So if you can introduce yourself for the record and
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. My name is Nick Demmel. I'm the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of Vermont. Excited to be here to talk about a very important topic facing the Department of Corrections. And I think, you guys hear from many state agencies and departments affecting the state governments writ large. And so we're here to talk about the impact that that's having on the correctional system. This really picks up from where we left off, I think about a week ago when we came in, just to give you an overview of our system. One of the challenges we highlighted in that overview, and really the prima facie, the top challenge that we have is our staffing in the Department of Corrections. And we look at it as it's twofold. We care a lot about the people, that's the staff in our system, and wanting to take care of them, wanting to invest in them, professional development, kind of wraparound services. And it's staffing, how we manage the facilities. These are critical infrastructure for the state of Vermont. They're staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. We don't have the opportunity to just lock the door and go home for the night. These must be staffed, and they must be staffed at appropriate levels. And so for us, it's a twofold problem. One is really taking care of the humans who work and serve the state, and the other is taking care of the system itself, making sure it's running the way it's supposed to. So there's a couple of kind of contextual slides I want to walk you through, a couple of pieces of data, and then I want to talk to you about what we've done over the last 3 years to really dig in and attack this problem. It's probably not a surprise to you that Vermont is facing really challenging workforce demographics. We have an aging population. The workforce is shrinking in the state. And unfortunately, I don't have a lot of good news to tell you on this front. There isn't a whole nother workforce about to enter the ranks to backfill what we've lost from the generations that are aging out of the workforce, that are retiring. In fact, retiring early by most measures. And so we're losing a lot of experience in this workforce that were not easy to replace.
You're probably gonna get there, but you're talking about retiring and all that. Do you have an age limit as far as when somebody can come into corrections?
As far as when they can enter,
Yeah, or their retirement age?
I've never been asked that before. I know we certainly recruit folks who are in their 40s, 50s.
Okay.
I believe we recruit somebody in their 60s if they, were willing to do the job. But I will run that to ground. And we do have, there are kind of key retirement timelines for folks based largely on the pension system when somebody becomes eligible. But I know we've got folks certainly in their 60s working in the system and in security staff roles.
So it's not like 55 years old, like with
Right.
law enforcement.
Yeah. No, I think most people, when they reach their retirement age, tend to retire pretty quickly or within a few years of that. So we don't tend to have, but one thing I'll note for you, Senator, is as we are running some of the largest academies we've ever run, we are capturing a lot of mid-career hires. So folks are entering the corrections workforce a little later. Not everybody, not a vast percentage, but I am, as I go and meet the new academy classes, I'm struck that there are a lot of mid-career hires who are joining and doing this work. So on the demographics, as we look at the composition of the workforce, there are some startling trends, and I think that's what this slide is showing here. We're really primarily recruiting folks who are between 20 and say 45, not because that's the only crowd we want, but that's the primary bulk of folks who are applying. And you see, on both sides of that curve, the workforce is contracting. And as I mentioned, the younger workforce, there just aren't as many people entering the workforce. And that's exacerbated in Vermont. This is true nationally of broad trends across the demographics, but in Vermont, that's, I think, acutely painful. And we know that that's true in New Hampshire and Maine. Many of our New England counterparts are also facing these similar challenges. We also know that correctional staffing across the country has been hit especially hard. And that is true leading up to the pandemic. The pandemic was essentially a supercharger for that problem, and it's been true as we leave the pandemic. I think the hope was we would see a pretty precipitous bump back up to kind of pre-pandemic levels nationally, and that has not happened. And I think part of that is many folks left the workforce entirely during that time frame. Many folks are seeking other employment. The one benefit of having a relatively strong job market is people can go find a lot of different jobs. The tough thing is when we're recruiting for really difficult jobs, that might not be top of the list for folks. But you can see, headlines across the country in every major publication detailing the correctional challenges that are faced in that particular state. And while we talk about the work itself, this is not a job for everybody, and it is not an easy job. One of the things that we've been studying a lot is the rate of violence against correctional officers. It far exceeds every other employment type in the country, to include law enforcement, to include military folks, to include frontline combat forces. The rates of PTSD, of suicide ideation, of domestic violence, divorce, alcohol and substance use disorder, astronomically high compared to other types of occupations. So bringing back down to the vacancy issue that we're facing, if you look across the country, Vermont's doing pretty well comparatively. I would say we're doing really, really bad. So that gives you a sense of where the country is. So the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which is the national prison system, has a 24% vacancy rate. Texas has a 25% vacancy rate. Michigan's 17.5% or so. New Hampshire's 25%. Last year, New Hampshire had to call out the National Guard for one of its facilities in order to maintain the security of the facility. We've also found Vermont, along with a couple other states, was asked by the Justice Department to join on a project to help really study and address this issue. Something that the Justice Department had done with law enforcement about a decade ago. They're just getting around to corrections, unfortunately. But we're honored to be asked, and we've been participating in that in the last year and a half or so. What that group has found is over time is up substantially across the correction spectrum. And again, the number of folks coming into the workforce is really going to challenge us. And one of the statistics we threw up here is that the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that we're going to have a further 7% decline in available correctional officer staff over the next 10 years. So this problem is going to continue to push us further. One thing you'll hear a lot is the solution to this problem is increased pay. And I could not disagree. We have repeatedly gone to that tool over and over again, and we have seen no major impact on our staffing during the time that we've done that. That isn't to say that correctional officers are paid enough. I don't think they are, frankly. It isn't to say that the work doesn't deserve greater compensation. I think it does. But when we drill this down to the challenges we're facing in staffing our facilities, money is not the solution to this. It may be part of a package of solutions, and I'll tell you how we've approached that in the last couple of years. But this slide will show you we've had nationally a 25% increase in correctional staff salaries over the last 6, 7, 8 years. And during that same time, we've seen almost a 20% decline in the number of correctional officers nationally. That doesn't mean we're paying them more, therefore they're leaving. It means that these challenges are greater than this. And when we simplify this problem down to we just need to pay them more, unfortunately, that misses the major underlying, the fundamental problems that we're not solving.
Yeah, or you could take it to mean that there would have been fewer, that there would have been more of a decline if you hadn't paid them more.
Perhaps, yeah.
That doesn't prove causality.
Right, exactly. And I'm not saying that it does, but it does show that the money alone cannot solve this problem. We need to get to the real root issues and start fixing those. And so that's how we've approached this problem. So I say that money isn't the solution, and yet I'm about to tell you that in the last 3 years, the state has invested more than $30 million in additional compensation above the normal pay rates to correctional staff
What period of time?
in the last 3 years. And
30 million?
It's really like the last 2.25 fiscal years. $30 million in additional investments. And I believe in that. We also, during that time, and just this recent contract, negotiated a correction-specific pay plan. So correctional officers now have moved out of the normal state pay plan, and they have a correction specific one that specifically is designed to speed people through steps at a higher rate, faster rate, and also provides higher base pay. And so our goal there was, instead of continuing to band-aid these problems with side letters and bonuses, instead we wanted to really build into the base salary additional increases. That's something the state police had done a number of years ago, and it's an idea that we were really attracted to. So I say this to not say that money isn't part of the solution, because I do think it is. And I think the state has made really meaningful, substantial investments in this space. I mean, when I started in corrections about 3.5 years ago, we were in a hearing much like this, talking about the staffing issue, and the SEA was asked what it would take to help fix this problem. They said at the time, we would need to inject $20 million into the system. Well, we did that. And then we invested another $10 million into the system on top of that. But again, fundamentally, that doesn't solve the issue. So let me talk about some of the things that we have done to try to address those underlying problems. We have, I'm gonna rattle off some things. I'm gonna tell you how it all makes sense. Before that, I'll maybe pause.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you're about to say the things you've done to address the underlying problems. What are the underlying?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. So you want the predicate. I can appreciate that.
I mean, I can probably infer.
Yeah,
stuff,
no, it's
solutions. But
It's a very valid point. I'll talk to Haley and Isaac about why we didn't put that in. So we have to have a little bit of fun.
wrench
Right.
gears.
Yeah. I think that there's a couple of primary drivers here. One, this is really difficult work. It's human services work, but human services work taken to the extreme. You're dealing with typically a very difficult population, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, but difficult in the sense of the folks that you're working with on a daily basis, the folks who are incarcerated, are highly complex. They often have substantial needs. Some of those are mental health needs, some of those are substance use needs. Some folks are, I think, violent and criminogenic by nature, and that's a small percentage of our population, but it is a population that you experience. There's acts of violence in the workplace on a regular basis. I showed you that slide. So there's that kind of bucket that makes the job challenging right out of the gate before you talk about anything else. I also then think there's been a major underinvestment in the people. I think we have for a long time expected correctional officers to go through the academy, learn a very complicated discipline, and then put a uniform on, get in the facilities and do your job. And at 25 or 30 years, you can retire and thank you for your service and move on. I think that underappreciates the human aspect of the work and that we need to spend a lot more time investing in people. That means career development, but it also means wellness and just taking physical health care and the mental, emotional health care that comes along with these jobs. I think the wraparound services for families has been missing over the years. And I think those underinvestments kind of magnify problems that develop as part of these careers. The other place I think that is a major problem is the working conditions, the workplace is really tough. And I know some or all of you are coming to visit soon to one of the correctional facilities, so you'll see this up close. But these are really difficult physical environments, particularly the way they've been built in Vermont. A lot of concrete, a lot of steel. They're very loud. The physical environment is difficult to work in. There's very little natural light. And so you have kind of a tough job in a really tough place with tough people that you're working with, and all of this compounds on itself. Now, what I think most correctional officers would tell you if you ask is they absolutely love the work, love the mission. It's all these other things that gets piled on that makes it a really tough place to work. Then in the last, 7 years or so, the mandatory overtime has ballooned. And so now there's no opportunity for respite, no relaxation, time away from the facility. And I think that's just a recipe for disaster.
Thank you. When you say they love the work, what about the work?
Well,
They love?
I think that there's a lot to like about this work. You have an opportunity on a daily basis to have a substantial amount of impact on a lot of people in a way that I can't think of another job that has the spectrum of impact that you can have as a correctional officer, because you interact with a lot of folks who also tend to have a lot of needs. And I think people really appreciate that opportunity to have that kind of service orientation. I think as you get into the kind of discipline of correction, the theory behind how this all works, particularly now in the modern era, people really gravitate towards that. It's a lot of psychology. It's a lot of trying to understand the human condition, improve it so that people can go back out of community and be successful. I think a lot of our staff take pride in the fact that they are keeping the public safe. It's, there's an inherent public safety element to this. It interacts with the justice system, which I think many of our staff find interesting. And it's much more varied than I think people appreciate. I think people think of prisons are like, okay, people get locked up, they get fed, they get health care, then when they're done with their sentence, they get out. But that's not really how a correctional system works. It's a little city, and there are all these various services being provided, and it's a kind of complex puzzle to put together. And I think our staff really gravitate towards that. There's a guy on my staff who's been around for 100 years or something, and he said to me one day, I don't know anybody who came to corrections knowing they wanted to be a correctional officer. Maybe somebody who had a father or a grandfather or something who was a correctional officer, but most people kind of fall into it backwards and then fall in love with it and then stay for a career in it. And that's a good thing. I mean, those are the folks we want to capture. We don't really want the folks who are there just for the paycheck. We don't want folks who are there as a stepping stone to something else. We'll work with them. That's fine if people want to do that. But we want the people who fall in love with the work, because it's really important work. It's not for everybody. We want them there for the right reason. I think those are factors that play into that.
And I will say the same, Commissioner. When you have a prison in your area, you know these people, you know them well. I've spent a lot of time with the correction people. I'm just trying to go through my head right now. How many of them I know? I know so many of them. I just do. And they do like their job, and they love one another. Yeah, they do. They get together. I don't know how many times I've had them at my camp or at my house or whatever, just because I'm friends with them. And they stand by each other. They're a pretty dedicated bunch.
Yeah.
They're good people. They're very, very good people. So I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Okay, yes.
So obviously pay isn't the main driver that you see. And so the other thing would be benefits that you would give and I'm not quite sure if you can really change workplace environment.
I hope so.
Um,
You are the institutions committee. You can help us with that.
well, we'll see what we can do. You know, Senator England ready to write a check for it.
I appreciate that very much, yeah.
I'll borrow from Senator Baker.
See, you've been here longer.
So now I understand how this committee works.
Yeah.
It's all making sense.
Know where the money goes.
You're right.
So you're about to tell us what you feel is going to help you
Yes, sir.
retain. And so I'm waiting.
Yeah, so I wanna clarify something though. When I talk about pay, I really am talking about pay and benefits, kind of a
Okay.
combination. And there have been changes to the pension system and things. Those will largely fall outside our scope. So pay we negotiate through the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, but mostly the benefits are not negotiated that way. So I tend not to talk about those as much. I think they are important. I mean, particularly folks with families are drawn to the state healthcare system, the health insurance, stuff like that.
But I would also say, sometimes we have a tendency to think of benefits as 401k, healthcare, things of that nature. Benefits are other things as well. And whether it is, and I know this is probably negotiated with the union, vacation, but being able to feed, being able to, things, vacations that you can give, and I'm going to the extreme, family, you talked about family and things that you can, in workplace environment. So that's sometimes what I think of benefits as well, not just the healthcare.
No, that makes sense. And I think you're getting close to the area that I think we need to spend a lot more time is, we have worked on the pay and the true benefits, like state provided benefits. What we found though, particularly as we now transition to recruiting millennials and Gen Z, are the things that draw those two generations to the workforce are not those traditional things. They're not the pay and traditional benefits, but they're things like work-life balance, something we are struggle to provide. Connection to mission, which is good because we have a good mission. That's something that we can draw people in on and say, you can have a big impact here. But we've so long kind of recruited and approached this in the traditional model of what people are drawn to the workforce for. And those things aren't the things that draw them to the workforce anymore. So we needed to retool our model. The other thing I wanted to highlight though is, and I think I mentioned this last week, but forgive me if I didn't, we do not have a recruitment. We are really good at recruiting and we've gotten even better over the last 3 years. We're running academies, every academy. So the traditional academy in DOC was about 20 cadets per academy. We're at least running 30 cadets academy, every academy now. Many of our academies are twice the size of a normal one, which is causing us other problems. But what we have is a retention problem. And that speaks to the physical environment. It speaks to the work experience. Like what happens to you when you go to work? Is it a positive experience? Is it a neutral experience? Is it a negative experience? I think most people will tell you it is a negative experience right now. And, things that do keep people in the workforce, I think are the camaraderie, I know this is gendered language, but brotherhood, the fraternity that comes with working the correctional system. People know the stuff you go through every day. They can empathize at a really deep level. They've experienced it too. That keeps some people in. But when the experience is too bad, particularly too bad for too long, people will not stay working there. And that's what we're experiencing. So we have data, it's not in this deck, but data that would show you the folks leave the fastest within the first 3 months of coming out of our academy. Then it's the next 3 months, then it's the next 3 months. So What it also shows though is if you can get them to a year, they tend to stay longer then. So that's our kind of target, is how do we keep people just a little longer while we work to make the situation better. And in positive news, this last year was the first year in a very long time where we kept more people than we lost. There's a slide, I don't have it with me, but there's a slide from my colleague in Texas that shows over the last 7 years, how many folks they've hired, how many folks they've lost. And every year but one, they've lost more folks than they hired. What the underlying point of the slide is to show is they've turned their entire workforce over 5 times in 7 years. They've lost an entire workforce 5 times. I mean, that no business in America would survive under that model. And yet in the United States, that's been acceptable for corrections historically. And I bet if Vermont replicated that data, it showed the same thing. I'm not trying to call out Texas. I think we're all in the very similar situation. I mentioned that we're in this project with the Justice Department, and we're using the 3 states, Vermont, Michigan, and Texas, to compare notes. And, 3 very different places. Texas and Vermont could be more different. We're pretty different from Michigan too, but labor, non-labor, big, small, medium, different prison populations, different judicial systems, and yet on our workforce, on every set of data that we've looked at, it is exactly the same. We go through the exact same trend lines, and Texas has done totally different things than Vermont. Michigan's done totally, and yet we're following the same trend lines. So that tells me this is not a Vermont problem. It is happening in Vermont, and we as Vermonters, particularly the Vermont government, need to take this on. But this is a national problem. There are national forces at play here. And it also speaks to, I think, the need for corrections to retool and become better at doing this work and be more respectful of the people who work in these systems. And I think until we do that at a fundamental level, we're not going to address these problems.
Yeah. Go ahead, and then
Well, you mentioned 2 states that you're comparing with, and they're having the same, at least on the surface, issues that you were having. There must be 50 states, someone doing it better.
Yeah, I think there are places doing it better. I don't know that I would say there are places doing it well yet. But I think that if Vermont is in the top, we're in the top couple.
So that's a good segue to my question. So in Maine, you're familiar with their facilities.
Yeah.
I believe they have a low recidivism rate compared to what we have. I haven't checked that out.
I don't know. I know what the
But-
recidivism rate in their women's range facilities.
Right,
It's easy
which
to
is
remember.
0, right. I don't know if they have a men's reentry, but have you looked at any correlation between the amount of actual services and trainings and educational opportunities? Because I'm concerned from what I've heard, and I need to know more about this, but there have been several existing trainings and vocational programs that just don't exist anymore. So I would think that the correctional officers, when you talk about mission, would be motivated if the residents were getting better and active and learning, as opposed to just sitting and,
Yeah.
no,
I think
not learning.
I think your premise is right. Yeah, I agree with you. So that's going to take us into a whole different space about vocational training and programming.
Yeah,
I'm happy to walk through that at some point.
No,
But I agree
that's
that
really important to talk about. At
if
some
we
point, we have to.
can improve the services we offer, and we can tell you some ways that we're doing that, I think we'll get a more engaged workforce. I'd say the other thing, particularly as it relates to the women's facility in Maine, is it's a nice place to work. It's a beautiful building. There's light, just an immense amount of natural light. The fixtures are made of wood instead of metal. It's a more therapeutic place for the folks who are incarcerated there. That was the point of its design. But that has a benefit for staff too.
Sure.
And so I think you would see that the staff in a facility like that are happier than staff not every facility looks like that. They have facilities that look like ours too. And I bet if you compared the two, the folks in the women's reentry facility would be happier than the folks.
Right, but it's not just
Makes
women's
sense.
reentry, it's the women's prison and the men's prison too. There's a new men's prison that is similar with light and wood.
Yeah.
So it can be done that way too.
It should be, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the direction we'd like to go. And our first project is our own women's facilities, but yeah, we have 6 facilities statewide. I think in the long run, we need to get more facilities to be a modern design.
We'll take the money to it.
It does. Well, he's got to use it. So let me talk about some of the areas that we've targeted, some of the things we've done. So I think that could be helpful to illustrate the points I'm trying to make. So on the mental health, and this is all focused on staff. I mean, I'm going to move away from the programming piece and talk just about the things we've done for the folks who work in our system. On the mental health space, we hired a mental health clinician whose job is solely to support our staff. We've changed spaces within our facilities. The little amount that we can manipulate the facilities to be better to create staff wellness spaces. We redesigned our mission, vision, and values work a couple of years ago to really give folks something to anchor their work on. One of the primary complaints that we were hearing from staff is that we didn't tell them enough, we didn't communicate enough. So we've tried to totally redesign the way we communicate with staff, do it more often, use different mediums. We created the partnership with the Community College of Vermont. So folks on our staff get free access to community college education, and they can pass that benefit on to their dependents, so their spouse and their children.
Great. Just quick question. Are they taking advantage of that?
Yeah, and the reception has been really positive. We actually, you're going to keep getting me off track.
Sorry, that's what we do.
Yeah, it's okay. We actually started incorporating CCD into our corrections academy so that when a staff member joins DOC and goes to the academy, they're automatically enrolled in CCD. Whether they ever end up taking classes there again or not, they're enrolled as a student, so they have that access. And that has streamlined people's ability to just, they graduate from the academy, they go to work, and then they can take a pottery class, or they can learn guitar, or they can grow a whole new set of skills and get an associate's degree, set them up to go wherever they want to go. So that I can't speak enough about that program, and we can highlight some more of that because there's also a section that relates to the incarcerated population there. On the staffing pressures side, we created the Office of Professional Standards and Compliance a number of years ago now, with the whole goal of trying to improve the staff experience. They also run all of our training, our staff professional development, our mental health and wellness work. That's an executive level office in the department. We've moved a lot of resources there to help do and organize that work. A couple of years ago, if we were in here, you would have heard a lot about hospital coverage, how impactful that is. So that's when somebody leaves a prison, goes to the hospital. Because our staffing was so bad, our probation parole staff were largely having to cover that. In order to resolve that, we created just an 11-person team to take hospital coverage. And they don't take it all because there are only 11 people, but pretty close. That has resulted in a 70% decrease in our standby pay to the tune of about $500,000, just transferring 11 people and creating a new specialty team. So that's a model that we're looking to replicate as we look at other pain points across our system. But that was really in response to staff concern about the amount that probation parole staff were having to work in the hospitals. And that team has been completely just more successful than we could have ever imagined. Some of the benefits have been better relationships with the hospitals, better health outcomes for the folks who are going to the hospital because there's more continuity among the team who's helping folks there. We also, when we're really at the peak of this crisis, which was July of 22, we implemented what we call the Stability and Sustainability Plan. It was a multi-plank effort to try to tackle the staffing crisis. One of the marquee parts of that plan was, to your point, Senator, we surveyed our staff and asked them, what is the thing that you want? What are the real pain points? And the number one thing we heard from staff was, I never get any time away from this facility. So I never see my family, or if I don't have a family, I don't see my friends. I don't get to go blow off steam. I never have a day off. I never get to sleep. So we looked at the way we structured our schedules, and we completely redesigned the schedule in order to maximize the time away from our facilities. And that's probably another whole presentation we could give you and the data that supports that effort. So that was one of the big changes that we made a couple of years ago as part of the sustainability plan. On staff recognition and appreciation, this is another place where we're falling down. And so we created what we call the Spotlight on Staff, which is a way for each month managers, supervisors submit spotlights on staff for great work that staff are doing across the department. We announce those at our monthly town hall that we do for all staff. We also changed our annual reward and recognition ceremony. So we have a very large ceremony now. We have a variety of categories that folks win awards in. We've increased the amount we do merit bonuses, created new challenge points for folks, and then we've also streamlined the way we do retirement, the recognition of folks retiring out of our system. And that was all targeted at this pain point that we were having where staff didn't feel like we appreciated their work and weren't recognizing it. So we've tried to build out the different ways that we can recognize folks' work.
Question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It would be, you said it's the monthly spotlight or the,
Spotlight on staff.
right, what sort of things are you highlighting that staff is doing when you award those? And what's been the response to those? Has there been any, it's just a little gold star that they're sticking on me, or are people taking it seriously and happy to get it?
I mean, I think folks have taken it seriously. So we get a whole spectrum of submissions, everything from, this person de-escalated a situation in the facility in a living unit, but, expert communication skills. So no force was needed. So stuff like that, kind of local level, you did a really good job. All the way to tractor trailer went off the interstate on fire. People, 2 correctional officers stopped on their way to work and pulled people from the wreckage type of stuff, and everything in between. So it can be life-saving events. We've had folks who intervened when somebody was overdosing on the street downtown. We've had life-saving events in facilities. They really run the gambit, and it's been pretty awesome to see because, particularly when we're a big organization, 1,000 employees, and when you're in some of the senior leadership ranks, you don't get to hear all of these stories of just amazing things that are happening in the facilities, out in the community. And I think staff have really appreciated it. We don't give them anything necessarily, so there's not a kind of gold star moment. It's simply we want to highlight great work that's being done. We try to do that on a monthly basis.
Always good to be recognized.
Yeah.
I value my people that I have in my businesses, and I find that there's 2 things that people really gravitate towards. They want to be seen, and they want to be recognized.
Yeah.
And those are the simplest things sometimes.
Yeah.
If you can do that, and of course, with all that, it's appreciated. But so I can see where that would work.
Yeah. Now, some of these spotlights on staff also warrant actual awards that are given out as part of the other process. So life preservation awards, acts of valor, things like that. The other piece, corrections nationally here in Vermont doesn't get a lot of positive press. We don't get a lot of positive stories written about the amazing work, some of the work we were just talking about. And so we created a concerted effort to change that, to get more positive news out into the cycle. It's one of the things staff tell me to this day all the time is nobody ever says anything positive about us. It's always somebody died in a facility or somebody was arrested for something. And so we really wanted to tackle that. And so we created a statewide marketing campaign. We hired a marketing company to help us with that. You probably see some of that here and there. Corrections Minute is one example of part of that campaign that's been very positively received. We've increased our social media presence. We've instituted system-wide newsletters on various topics. We have facility newsletters. Our Office of Professional Standards has a newsletter that goes out just to get more information out. And then we've really partnered and cultivated relationships with various media sources in Vermont to highlight when we have positive news stories. So the CCD program was one that's gotten a lot of traction, highlighting that we're getting this benefit to staff and the impact that it's having. We also created, when we talk about the experience at work, and that's a word you'll hear me say a lot, because I think that encapsulates what we're trying to change. We created what we call facility staff experience supervisors in each facility. So a supervisor level employee in every facility whose only job it is to work on the culture, improve the experience of staff. And I really have pushed them to think very small about this. It's go check in with person, say hi to, it was Senator, to your point, it's how you doing today? It seems like you're a little off. Is there anything I can do for you? It's what do you want to see out of your career? How do I help you get there? Can we create a plan in that space? Those folks have been really critical and a great addition to all 6 of our facilities. We've also increased our presence on employment websites, trying to do more recruitment. We're piloting different ways to do our academy. You know, it's historically been in person. It's in the Lyndonville area. It's 6 weeks long, which is a big ask for families. And particularly we've heard from people with young families, it's really tough to go away for 6 months. I understand that. I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. Barely get away for 6 minutes before something catches on fire. So we're piloting new ways to do that, using CCB as an opportunity. Maybe we can use their campuses or their technology, having satellite academies so that folks, if they're in the Chittenden County area, they're down in Brattleboro, they don't have to go all the way to Lyndonville, they could maybe do it from their space. But really trying to meet people where they're at, basically, and so that we can draw more folks in. On the retention space, we've worked really hard to increase that experience piece. And so we've created standard check-ins with the staff experience supervisors. We created stay, transfer, and exit interviews to really try to understand, why are you staying? Why are you moving somewhere else? Why are you leaving? So that we can try to target those pain points. We've delayed mandatory overtime for new officers. We know that's one of the driving forces that's pushing people out. So trying to get them to really want to do the work before we kind of bring the gauntlet down. And then we recognize that we can't do all of this alone in Vermont, particularly when we talk about training, and particularly when we talk about supervisor level training, manager level training, and leadership training. And so we partnered with our Northeast states. So basically the 11 states kind of on the Eastern seaboard, from New York kind of over. And we've created the Northeast Regional Training Institute. And we have begun doing regional training where we send folks to, we're going to move it around the different states. So it's constantly a changing location, but we send folks from all the different corrections departments to one place. So they get to mix, mingle, share ideas, hear from instructors from different states, really as a force multiplier, because none of the states, with the exception of maybe New York, can do that level of training by themselves. But when we pool resources and do this together, we have great opportunity to help build out that opportunity for folks.
And what states are part of that?
I think there's 11 of us. It's everybody in New England, kind of all the way down to the DC region.
Okay.
So Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and then what you would think of as the Northeast states.
Okay.
We also created a policy equity tool that we're using to analyze and make sure that our policies affecting staff are equitable. Another important one that I think Vermont is really leading the country in is our peer support program. So we have a robust peer support program in the state. It's we added team members, we added leadership to it in the last couple of years and grew the program. And that's situation where somebody's having a really tough time, they experience a critical incident at work, an attempted suicide, something like that. We deploy our peer support team there, and they're correctional officers meeting with correctional officers, helping them through really tough times. So they go through some specific training to help them with that. The legislature helped us last year in creating confidentiality. So it's actually, those conversations are protected under state law now. Great program that's been really valuable to staff. And then we're building out our professional development training series, expanding how we do career development for staff. We created a mentorship program. We created a women in corrections initiative that really targets that population, which in Vermont is actually larger than most correctional agencies with a large population of women on staff. And we invested in supervisory training, particularly with an emphasis on emotional intelligence. Knowing that that's where we are really struggling is to connect with our first line, between our supervisors and our first line, and help motivate, take care of, tend to the vast majority of our staff around the line. So we've done all that, and that's helped, but it's not enough. And I want to be very clear about that. I'm not saying, pat us on the back. This is what we should have been doing all along. We've started in the last 2.5 years, 3 years, and we've come a long way. I told you that we were at a peak vacancy rate in July of 2022. That was about 32% just in our security staff ranks. We're down to, I think it's around 19 today. We're kind of plateaued. So it's not enough. But this is where we get into a rub. We have the demographic issue that we're fighting against. We have a staff that really feels underinvested in, that needs more out of us, and we're trying to provide. And we have really tough facilities, tough work that we have them doing. So the other piece of this is, if we accept the premise that the workforce is shrinking and there will be fewer available people, regardless of what we do, then that means, the way I see that problem, is it means on the other side, we need to shrink what we're asking them to do. We have fewer people. They can't do the same workload as what we've been expecting for a long time. And I think for a long time, corrections has been asked to do a lot, and nothing ever gets taken away. So one of the major focuses of our strategic plan is stopping things, decommissioning work, saying we're not going to do it that way anymore, finding more efficient ways to do it, with the sole goal of bringing down the workload on our people. And I think that's another targeted strategy that we're pursuing to help folks be able to make this work, this career, sustainable. Because under our current model, and for the last 15 years or so, it hasn't been.
Yes.
Can you give an example of workload that you decreased? And it seems as if, particularly in corrections, the job's job. Kind of, when you're in there are certain protocols that you have to do and have to go by on a regular basis.
I heard that before we were online here, that you have served in the military before, and so I think you'll be familiar with this concept of mission creep. I think corrections, the job is the job, or it was, and then we started doing all this other stuff, and then we started doing things to try to do the original mission, but they just grow and grow. And so I agree with you that there are just things that we have to do. It's fundamental to the work, but I think the way we do them needs to be challenged. And so we have a variety of different ways that we can tackle that. It's the workload of an officer at the podium. So somebody working in a living unit, they have a bunch of stuff they're supposed to do within an hour, usually, kind of repeatedly. And all of it is recorded on paper. All of it involves different scheduled tours of the unit. There's no technology to support that. I think where I see this most acute is actually with supervisors. I go around and talk to supervisors a lot. I was just with most of our supervisors in the state last week there in our Washington area office. And what I hear from them is, I don't have any time to go talk to anybody that I supervise because I'm stuck in this office doing the myriad of things that I've been assigned. Everything from grievance responses. So if an incarcerated person files a grievance, that's like a judicial process that exists within corrections, filling the holes in the schedule, calling people because there have been call outs, getting the schedule set for future weeks, all sorts of administrative tasks. And I think we are starting now, and we should have been doing it a long time ago, but starting to go through and validate whether we need to do all these things. And then are there any other solutions we could bring in? Like, could we use scheduling software instead of having somebody spend hours a shift go through and work the schedule? Things like that.
Well, you speak of software, initially when you came in, one of the things that you said was crucial was Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
If that was upgraded, how much would that impact we're talking about.
I mean, if you gave me a blank piece of paper and said, design the Vermont correction system, you can do it however you want, but you design it today, it would look totally different. It would look like officers still at the podium. We need humans in the units to manage the population, but they would all have tablets. And the tablets would give them data on what's going on. We could have medical alert bracelets on every incarcerated individual who had posed a health risk so that we could see if their heart rate spiked or dropped. We know they need immediate medical intervention, and that could alert them through technology. We could do our checks. So that's when an officer walks around a unit, makes visual contact, make sure somebody's doing okay. And we could have RFID tags at every cell where they walk by and swipe, so that we know when that check was done, we know that it was done, and can ensure that the officers are doing the job the way they're supposed to. And importantly, when they're accused of misconduct, we know they didn't do the thing that they're accused of. Every officer would have body cams. That's something that the state bought them. They're sitting in a box. So there's a lot of different technology that we could bring online right now that would improve this system. Technology isn't the only solution, but I think there's a lot. We've just shied away from it because we've never had the infrastructure to be able to pull it off. And that's something we have to change immediately, in my opinion.
All right, well, that came to the right committee for that.
Yeah.
But so when you talk about getting rid of things, I hope vocational education is not one of those
No.
things, because just the reduction in vocational education is alarming to me. You know,
Yeah.
so, and I do want to have a more full conversation on that, but to me, that's critical. I mean, you might find other people to do it as
Yeah.
opposed to
I
correctional.
think that's part of the
Officers, but-
solution, but I agree with you. The model we were using was deeply flawed, and I'd like to bring, information in, we can talk through that, and then explain to you the model that we're building right now, because I think we need more robust vocational training than we've ever had before. In part because we know one of the predicates to somebody's success going in communities do they have income? If they don't have a job, the likelihood they're going to be back in our facility is pretty high.
Right.
If we can connect them with new skills and they can go out and get a job, not to mention the fact that Vermont has huge gaps in its labor
Right.
needs. And so if we can help people connect with the businesses that need people the most, it is a virtuous cycle that we would be creating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have that conversation too.
And
Please.
so I sense we're probably winding down a little bit. So this will take me about a minute, so bear with me.
You got it.
You have 6 minutes.
Thank you.
The commissioner has 6
Thank you,
minutes.
Chair. So I'm not gonna take 6 minutes. So I've been around for a while. I've been, I'm 60 years old. I'm not happy about that. That's what I am. And so I've seen people. And so state police, not state police, but when they got done 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they weren't in great shape and their minds were pounded.
Yeah.
They did make a change. They got them so that they got out of there and they were healthier when they retired, but their minds were still pounded. Now I think they made a change where now they're coming out of there and they're in good shape and their minds are good and all of that. And I hope the same for these guys.
Yeah.
I hope the same for corrections. I mean, I do believe that between everybody's that's been involved, that we've got them so they can retire comfortably and all that stuff. I want these folks to be able to come out of your workplace when they're all said and done and have life left to them, and be able to retire and be in health and have a good mind. And I think that is one of the biggest things. I would love to see, whether it was in a facility or somewhere, that they would have a gym membership and that they would have mental health. I think they have it available to them now, but they would have mental health that, that maybe they would have to go talk to. And because a lot of guys are guys, guys are, we don't know, what are we going to do that? But at least made to sit down at some point in time and say, hey, you want to have a conversation?
Yeah.
How you doing? And all that. So when they come out of there, I just want them to be able to enjoy their years of retirement and have a healthy body and have a healthy mind, and us advocating for that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And we've tried to be really thoughtful about how we introduce these resources, because to your point, particularly, law enforcement, corrections, first responders in general, very skeptical of outside help.
Right.
So the licensed clinical psychologist we brought on, that's her specialty, is first responders, particularly law enforcement and corrections. And I think that her whole body of work at this point is just in those populations. She's able to build trust with people in a way that they can't with other mental health practitioners. It's why our peer support program is so important, because that person understands me. They wear the gray too. You know, I think that's really critical. And you highlight some other important.
Well, it's almost like, Commissioner, I apologize for interrupting, but it's almost like, the people that are embedded into the state police right now, the mental health clinicians that are going up, they're riding with them and they're going with them.
Yeah.
Those guys love those people.
Yeah.
And I think they love them for as much for themselves as they do as being able to go on to the jobs or go onto their job site, which is usually something where they've been called on to. And to help them, but I think they almost help the officers as much as they help anyone, because they can see the interaction of how it happens, and I think they can relate to it.
Yeah, no, you raise a really good point, and it's worth highlighting that the most acute folks that law enforcement is engaging with end up coming to us.
Yeah.
Not everybody who law enforcement engages with comes to corrections. Many, kind of move on with their day, but the most acute crowd there comes to us, and so you have a concentration of that in the correctional system. And the primary difference that I see between law enforcement and corrections is law enforcement officer, that contact is episodic. I pull you over, I engage with you, maybe I arrest you, take you to jail. That's it. We're done. You and I are done. You come to a correctional setting, the correctional officer's got you that entire shift. You're gonna be with folks all the time. And so there is a mental health component that's different, just the persistent nature of being a correctional officer.
Right.
But you're right to highlight these are really difficult jobs. There's a lot of data suggests that the life expectancy of a correctional officer is much lower than the national average. I mentioned the rates of trauma and violence, suicide, contemplation, and that's all very high. So we do need to do better for the folks who are working in these facilities. I absolutely 100% agree with you. The last point I'll make.
I just got to, and the people in the facilities, because part of the problem is the power relationships.
Yeah. And that factors into the mental health component here. I mean, those dynamics are real.
Yeah.
Need to be contemplated as we think through this. The last thing I'll highlight here is I hope you heard we've done a lot of things and we are not coming off the gas. We have a lot more we're going to do. The thing that I told the Joint Justice Oversight Committee though in December is we have done all of this alone. We get help from no one. So we come to the legislature. The legislature is pretty helpful in so much as you provide funding. Maybe that's you, sir. And we have a bastion of support in the legislature. But we don't have, with the exception of the women's facility, we have almost no community-based providers who are supportive of the correctional system. That's not true on the substance use side. We actually have a very good partnership there. We'll be happy to talk to you about. Obviously, you heard about CCD, but that's about it. We get no help when we ask and try to pursue staff wellness initiatives. Nobody's really interested. When we go to bargain with our labor partners, the focus is almost exclusively on money. How do we increase the pay? But there's a lot more to this problem, and we're doing it alone. So we'll continue to do it alone. But my hope is at some point there is other interested parties who want to get into this space and help these people. You have to remember, these are public servants who are serving the state and doing really important work for the people in the state, for the people who live in the facilities, and they're kind of left out by themselves.
They're great people and they're held to a higher standard than most.
That's right, and it really breaks my heart that there's nobody else who's digging in to help us with this.
All right. Well, I hear you. Some of us are going on Friday.
Yep.
And we're going to keep going. And I was just at a meeting and in my community in Brattleboro, and folks were talking about wanting to volunteer at Southern State and not being able to because they aren't getting on the list or something.
Yeah,
I mean that.
figure it out.
But there are many people who want to help in
That's
all
great.
different ways. You know, artists, poets, just people to bring books. I mean, there's a lot of folks who want to help.
Yeah, great. So
Okay. Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming in.
Yep. See you soon.
See you soon. I don't know, do we have questions for Isaac or
Oh, sorry.
are we, I think we had a pretty robust.
Yeah.
But anybody wanna?
Well, I didn't meet with Rob.
I'm the
Sorry, I wasn't here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll see folks on Friday at Southern State at 2 p.m.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Will you be joining or just, yeah?
I think just three of us, but it might be more. Do we need to let you know in advance or?
No, we'll.
Do you need to do background checks on these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably are.
No, let me rephrase that. You need to do background.
All right. So, and without any other comments?